This is my real story. My name is Marissa Caldwell. I am 23 years old, and what I'm about to tell you is something that no one outside my family has ever heard before. I'm sharing it now because it destroyed everything I loved and changed the course of my life forever. Some people might think it's just another scary tale, but I swear to you every word is true, and I'm opening up so that you can see how darkness can follow a family through generations. My story is about a house, a legacy, and a curse that my family thought we had escaped, but that found me when I least expected it. What happened inside the old Caldwell Manor left me scarred in ways I can never heal, and the revenge that was waiting in those shadows wasn't only after my family, it was after me. If you want to know how horror can slip into real life, then listen carefully to this story, because once you begin, you won't be able to stop until you know how it ends. Please make sure to subscribe, like, and share this channel so that more people can experience stories like mine. And remember, this story is written and edited by Dark Life. The Side Diaries. Marissa Caldwell grew up with whispered warnings about Caldwell Manor, the sprawling Gothic estate on the edge of town that had belonged to her family for centuries, but had been abandoned long before she was born. And though her parents never told her the full truth, she had always felt the weight of its shadow in her life, the way relatives would go silent at the mention of it, the way her grandmother would cross herself whenever the name was spoken. And as she turned 23, she inherited more than just the old journals and fading photographs. She inherited the curse that had destroyed generations of Caldwells before her, but she didn't know that yet when she first set foot inside the manor, returning out of curiosity and a sense of duty after the death of her estranged uncle, who had lived there alone for decades before his mysterious and gruesome end. His body found broken at the bottom of the grand staircase, as if something unseen had thrown him down with unimaginable force. And though the coroner ruled it an accident, Marissa felt the cold breath of something darker the moment she crossed the threshold. The air thick with dust and sorrow, the walls lined with portraits of grim ancestors whose painted eyes seemed to follow her every step, and the silence inside was so complete it pressed on her ears like the weight of the ocean, until she heard a faint whisper, a voice that wasn't hers, wasn't her uncle's, wasn't any living person's, calling her name in a breathless hiss that made her blood run cold. But she told herself it was just the wind sneaking through broken windows, even though she knew deep down it was something else, something that had been waiting for her all along. And as she explored deeper into the manor, she began to uncover secrets that her family had buried for centuries. Journals filled with desperate scribbles about a woman wronged a woman who had cursed the Caldwell bloodline on the night she was betrayed and left to die within those walls, her rage echoing through generations, ensuring that no Caldwell would ever live peacefully, each death more brutal than the last, each tragedy etched into the family history like a warning. And Marissa realized that her uncle had been trying to stop it, that his isolation had been an attempt to contain whatever haunted the house. But in dying, he had passed the burden on to her, and as the nights grew longer and the shadows in the corners of her vision stretched closer, she began to feel the presence of the woman herself, her whispers turning to screams, her reflection appearing in cracked mirrors, her icy fingers brushing Marissa's skin as she slept. And though Marissa wanted to run, something compelled her to stay, a pull she couldn't resist, as if the curse itself was binding her to the manor, forcing her to uncover the truth. And so she stayed night after night, documenting the horrors in her own journal. And it was on the 7th night that she woke to find the ghostly figure of the woman standing at the foot of her bed, her face pale and hollow, her eyes burning with hatred, her voice a rasp that shook the air as she whispered, "Your blood must pay." And Marissa knew then that she couldn't escape, that the curse was alive and that it had chosen her as its next victim. But what she didn't know yet was that the curse wasn't just about punishment, it was about revenge. And the spirit's rage wasn't only against the Caldwell family, but against anyone who dared to stand in her way, meaning that Marissa wasn't just fighting for her own life, but for the lives of anyone who came near her. And that realization sank in as the house groaned around her, as footsteps echoed on empty stairs, as doors slammed shut without wind, and as the voice of the dead woman grew louder, more commanding her to uncover the betrayal that had started it all, because only then would Marissa understand the depth of the blood curse of Caldwell Manor, and only then would she realize that her family's darkest secrets had become her own. The days after that first terrifying encounter blurred into one endless cycle of fear and dread, because Marissa found herself trapped in Caldwell Manor, not by locked doors or physical barriers, but by a force she couldn't explain, as though the very walls pulsed with a heartbeat that resonated inside her chest, making her feel sick whenever she tried to leave her car, refusing to start. her phone battery draining to zero even when freshly charged in the once familiar world outside. The estate seeming farther and farther away until the only reality left was the creaking, suffocating house and the presence that had awakened there. And though she told herself she was brave enough to fight, the truth was that every night it grew stronger, and every morning she felt weaker, as if her life was being siphoned by something unseen. And it was then she discovered her uncle's secret basement chamber, hidden behind a false wall in the library, a room lined with candles melted into grotesque wax petals, salt circles etched into the stone floor, and dozens of journals stacked like a madman's archive, all filled with frantic notes, diagrams, and warnings about the spirit who her uncle named only as Evangeline, a maid who had lived and died in Caldwell Manor over 2 centuries ago, betrayed by Marissa's great-great-grandfather, who lured her into a secret affair before casting her aside and ensuring she was accused of witchcraft, locked away in the manor cellar until she starved to death, her body left unburied, her spirit festering with hatred until it poisoned the Caldwell bloodline. And though her uncle had spent decades trying to bind her, he wrote again and again that the curse could not be stopped, only passed on until someone was willing to pay the true debt in blood. And as Marissa read those words by candlelight, the house shuddered violently, as though in agreement, books tumbling from shelves, a window shattering outward. And when she looked up, the pale figure of Evangeline stood only inches away, her skeletal hand reaching out, her mouth opening to scream, but no sound came, only a rush of cold, so bitter it felt like knives against Marissa's skin. And then she was gone, leaving Marissa gasping, her heart pounding. But something in her eyes in that brief glimpse had been different, something not just hateful, but mournful, as though behind the rage there was a wound so deep it begged to be acknowledged. And though fear screamed at Marissa to flee, another part of her felt compelled to dig deeper, to find the cellar where Evangeline had died. But when she searched, the house resisted her doors, slamming shut staircases, stretching endlessly hallways, rearranging themselves like a living maze designed to confuse her. And it was only when she whispered Evangeline's name aloud that a hidden passage revealed itself, leading her into the bowels of the manor, where the air stank of mold and rot. And there in the darkness she found the crumbling remnants of a cell chain still bolted to the walls, a gnawed wooden bowl in the corner, and scratched into the stone with bloody fingernails were the words, "Caldwell lies." And when Marissa touched them, a vision slammed into her mind. Evangeline's final moments, starving, betrayed, whispering curses with her last breath, as the manor walls absorbed her hate, binding her forever. And Marissa staggered back, weeping, but before she could escape the vision, the specter materialized again, shrieking this time, her face a mask of fury, her hands clawing at the air as the chains rattled violently. And Marissa screamed, running back up the stairs, only to find the house closing in on her, every door locking, every light extinguishing, until she was plunged into total darkness. And she could feel Evangeline's presence pressing closer, her icy fingers tangling in Marissa's hair, her breath on the back of her neck, whispering, "You owe me." And Marissa collapsed to the floor, sobbing, begging to be left alone. And for a moment silence fell. Then the sound of a child's laughter rang through the halls, eerie and wrong. And Marissa realized the curse had twisted itself into more than one form, for she began to see not just Evangeline, but shadowy figures of children, of men, of women, every Caldwell who had died at the manor, emerging from the dark, their eyes hollow, their mouths dripping blood, surrounding her in a grotesque circle of death. And as she fainted from sheer terror, she awoke the next morning in her bed, as if none of it had happened except for the bruises on her arms and the shape of skeletal fingers, proof that the night had been real. And as she rose, she saw her own reflection in the cracked mirror. Except it wasn't her, not entirely, because behind her eyes flickered something else, something watching, waiting. And for the first time, Marissa realized the curse wasn't just haunting her. It was trying to claim her body, to use her as a vessel to finish what Evangeline had started, to unleash her vengeance on the entire world outside Caldwell Manor. And as the truth sank in, the silence of the house was broken by the sound of heavy footsteps echoing above her, even though she knew she was alone. And she whispered to herself through trembling lips, "I have to fight this, or it will never end." Marissa knew she couldn't run anymore, because every time she tried, the curse tightened its grip. So instead, she armed herself with what scraps of knowledge her uncle had left behind, poring over his journals by candlelight, memorizing incantations written in shaky handwriting, sketching the strange sigils she found carved into the margins. And though half of it made no sense, she sensed that if she pieced it together, she might find a way to sever Evangeline's hold. But the deeper she read, the more she realized her uncle had been on the brink of madness. His words spiraling into paranoia, repeating phrases like "the blood binds her" and "the heir must pay," until one night, as thunder rattled the windows and rain poured against the glass, Marissa found an entry scrawled in red ink that chilled her to the bone. "If you are reading this, then she has chosen you. She will not relent. She will not rest until a Caldwell suffers as she did. Death will not satisfy her. Only justice, her justice, can end this." And beside it, her uncle had taped a torn scrap of parchment far older than the journal itself, the edges brittle and darkened by time, bearing Evangeline's name and what appeared to be a confession signed in a hand so shaky it was nearly illegible, accusing her of witchcraft. And Marissa realized her ancestor had forged the document to condemn her, covering his sins, destroying her life. And with this revelation came a shift in the atmosphere, the candles flickering wildly as if Evangeline's spirit herself had been listening. And suddenly, the whole house groaned, a sound like a scream rattling through the rafters, and Marissa dropped the paper in terror, only to see it burst into flames on the floor, though no match had touched it. And from the shadows, Evangeline emerged, not frail this time, but towering, her eyes burning with white fire, her voice echoing from every corner of the room as she hissed, "Do you see the truth? Do you see what they did to me?" And Marissa, trembling, forced herself to speak, to say, "Yes, I see it. I know what he did. He destroyed you." But before she could say more, the spirit lunged, slamming her into the wall so hard her vision blurred, nails digging into her skin, whispering with venom, "Then suffer as I suffered." And Marissa screamed as pain coursed through her veins, as though she were starving, freezing, locked away in the dark, experiencing Evangeline's death inside her own body. And in that agony, she realized the ghost wasn't just tormenting her, it was trying to become her, to force its memories and rage into her until she ceased to exist. So with her last strength, she grabbed one of the salt jars her uncle had left and smashed it across the floor, forming a jagged line between them. And for a heartbeat, Evangeline recoiled, her form flickering like static, her scream so loud the windows shattered. But then she laughed, a sound so hollow it made Marissa's teeth ache, and whispered, "Salt slows me, child, but it will not stop me. Your blood is mine." And in that moment, Marissa knew she had to find Evangeline's remains, because the journals hinted that the body had never been buried, never sanctified, left to rot in some hidden place beneath the manor. And until that wrong was righted, the curse would never die. So she pushed herself into the cellar again, lantern in hand, heart hammering, searching for hidden doors, hollow walls, any sign of a burial. And after hours of scraping through stone, she uncovered a narrow passage behind the furnace, crawling through dust and cobwebs until she found herself in a small chamber where a stench of decay lingered even after centuries. And in the corner lay a mound of rags, bones scattered, a rusted chain still clamped to one brittle wrist. And though her stomach twisted, she knew it was Evangeline, or what was left of her. And when she knelt, tears filled her eyes, because she could almost feel the girl's suffering radiating from those bones. And she whispered, "I'm sorry," but the chamber suddenly plunged into icy cold as Evangeline's full form erupted before her, shrieking, "Sorry is not enough." And the bones rattled violently, lifting into the air, circling like a storm as shadows clawed at the walls. And Marissa was thrown to the ground, her lantern shattering, plunging her into darkness, except for the glow of Evangeline's hollow eyes. And as she crawled backward, she realized the spirit was tethered here, bound to the remains. And though it was terrifying, it also meant this was her chance, because if she could consecrate the bones, perhaps she could finally break the curse. But before she could act, Evangeline swooped down, her skeletal hands gripping Marissa's face, her voice a guttural growl. "You will finish what your uncle could not. You will carry me. You will be me." And Marissa felt her body convulsing, her veins burning as though filled with ice, her voice strangled by another's. And in that moment, she fought with every ounce of willpower she had, shoving against the spirit, clawing at her own skin, screaming, "You can't have me." And for an instant, the chamber flashed with blinding white light, as if the manor itself had responded. But then darkness returned, thicker than ever, and Marissa collapsed unconscious on the stone floor, her last vision the grinning face of Evangeline, whispering, "Soon." When she awoke hours later, she was lying in her own bed again, the bones gone, the chamber sealed, as if the house itself had swallowed them back into its belly. And though she searched, she couldn't find the passage anymore, as if it had never existed. But she knew it had, because her arms bore the bruises of chains, her nails were bloody from scraping stone, and worst of all, when she looked into the mirror, she saw Evangeline's reflection instead of her own. Just for a moment, but enough to confirm what she feared most, that the spirit wasn't just haunting her anymore, it was inside her, festering, feeding, waiting for the final moment to take control, and the next time she closed her eyes, she dreamt of herself walking through her hometown, but it wasn't her, it was Evangeline inside her body, smiling with satisfaction as flames consumed every building, every person screaming in agony, and she jolted awake with a scream, realizing the curse wasn't confined to Caldwell Manor anymore. It wanted to spread, and she was the door that could unleash it on the entire world. Marissa no longer slept without fear, because every time her eyes closed, she saw Evangeline wearing her skin, burning the world down piece by piece. And though she tried to resist, the whispers in her head grew louder each day, filling her thoughts, twisting her desires, urging her toward violence, and she realized she had little time left before she wasn't Marissa anymore, but a vessel of vengeance, centuries in the making. So she returned to her uncle's journals one final time, tracing the ink stains, reading the most unhinged passages, until she found a note she had overlooked before, half burnt at the corner, where he had scrawled, "The curse ends only when blood pays for blood, but not by death, by choice." And those words echoed in her mind because they meant Evangeline didn't just want her to die, she wanted her to surrender, to willingly offer herself as justice for the betrayal committed by her ancestor. And for days Marissa wrestled with the truth, until the night came when the manor shook so violently the roof cracked, shadows spilling down the walls like ink, windows exploding inward, and Evangeline appeared fully formed, no longer a flicker, but a towering specter of fire and bone, her voice thundering, "The time has come, choose or I will choose for you." And Marissa, shaking, stepped into the collapsing hall, clutching the last relic her uncle had left, an iron dagger said to pierce both flesh and spirit, and she cried out, "If it's justice you want, then take me, but take me on my terms," and plunged the blade into her own hand, blood spilling across the rotting wood, and the spirit lunged shrieking triumphantly. But as their blood and shadow collided, a surge of light burst from the wound, ripping through the manor like a hurricane, rattling its foundations, and Evangeline screamed, not in anger but in something like release, her face shifting from monstrous to human, a girl's face filled with sorrow. And Marissa saw her for who she truly was, not a demon but a victim, chained and forgotten. And she whispered, "You are free," as the light consumed them both, the house collapsing into ruin, silence falling for the first time in centuries. And when the dust cleared, rescuers from the town found only rubble, no trace of Marissa, no trace of bones, no trace of Evangeline, as though they had been erased together, bound in one final act of justice. And the whispers spread of the Caldwell heir who vanished, of screams and fire, of shadows in the ruins at night no one ever rebuilt on that cursed land, because some swore they still saw a young woman wandering the hill, her face shifting between two souls, Marissa and Evangeline, forever entwined, warning all who dared to trespass. And while some said it was a tragedy, others whispered it was a mercy, because the curse had finally ended, but at a cost no one could ever repay. Thank you so much for watching this. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Our support keeps these haunting tales alive. Stay tuned for more spin-a-killing real horror stories every week. Until next time, sleep with the lights on. You never know what shadows are waiting.